Hello again, guys, it is I, Freezer700. We are back with some Warhammer 40K lore. This time, World Eaters. Their early history, also known as the Preheresy history. So if you guys didn't check out the video now, I would highly recommend you check out the Warhounds video for a bit of context to a lot of what I'm about to say. Because the Warhounds is what this legion used to be known as. And we're going to go over some more Warhound stuff, but we're also going to be mostly covering what the World Eaters were before they really fell to chaos. So, that being said, where did the name come from, World Eaters? Well, you see, when Angron was a slave and he was fighting his freedom and the Emperor discovered him, his army was known as the Eater of Cities, because that's what Angron did. He would destroy a few cities here and there, but he wasn't able to actually get anywhere with his army. He was not going to conquer a whole world like Jagatai Khan could. So, when Angron finally got done with his hissy fit that the Emperor beamed him up into his ship against his wishes, and Karn finally walked out with Angron in tow, this is the first time all of the Warhounds have seen Angron. This is a good thing. Angron's now finally taking control of the Legion. Well, Drieger, the cocksucker that he is, he starts to talk about Angron's past, and he goes, you know, Angron, your army used to be known as the Eater of Cities. But with us, we will be the Eaters of Worlds. So that's where the name World Eaters comes from, because Drieger likes to kiss ass. Especially the ass of this big, tall, mighty brute known as Angron. Now, the Warhounds, which is what they used to be, didn't exactly change that much, honestly. From World Eater to Warhound, like, there wasn't much differences between the two. Because, as I said in the Warhound video, they were only used in reserve. They were only used for a total slaughter. Now, the World Eaters didn't exactly change that much, because that's exactly what they did. They still slaughtered. The only difference was that now they had someone to organize behind. Someone who still didn't really have much tactics except for charge at the enemy, but now they had a face to put the blame on. So now it's like, okay, the Warhounds butchered a whole world, and they just simply said, well, the Emperor didn't tell us to take prisoners. Okay, you fucking jackasses. Whatever, it was a one-time occurrence, whatever. Angron, he always slaughters the world. And many times it's been shown as a net loss for the Imperium, because they just lose too much collateral damage. Like, the infrastructures are no good anymore. The city is totally empty now because it's full of carcasses, so now they gotta pay money to just clean up the fucking buildings because it's just spattered with blood. But also they gotta rebuild everything because, again, Angron doesn't give a fuck about infrastructure. He just destroys it all. So as far as to Warhounds to World Eaters, there wasn't much of a difference. They're still slaughterers, but the big thing about them that you could say really fucked them to chaos was their brotherhood, their camaraderie. So the World Eaters were a lot like, I would say, the Salamanders in some regard. Now, the Salamanders welcome everybody as a brother. Everybody is a brother to them. They're very loving and very compassionate with everyone, including humans. The World Eaters aren't exactly too caring about humans. They really hate humans a lot. But they're very camaraderie. In fact, ranks don't really matter to them. You could be a corporal, it doesn't matter to them. They're all about brotherhood, they're all about being a tight-knit group. This is really elaborated on in one of the books where Lotara Saren is most infamously known for shooting a World Eater in the face. Well, that's not what is really a good example of Brotherhood. What's a good example of Brotherhood is what happens afterward, where this World Eater who just got shot in the face is now in the arena, because this Legion, even before the Heresy, they had arenas where they would constantly test each other's metal, just like they would when they were in training on the world Bot. And as I said in the Warhounds video, Bot was their training world, that's their home world, where they would just train, and they would always train against each other. Well, now as a Legion, they would have arena pits inside their ships, so that way they could train against each other even more. Now here's where it gets interesting. So that guy who got shot in the face, he got shot in the face because he abandoned his post. He left his brothers, and in return, as a result of this abandonment, they actually took some heavy losses. So his Brotherhood wasn't just fine with him getting shot in the face because he was just going to shrug it off. So what they did instead was they had him keep fighting. Keep fighting. Now, in the arena, when you're inside the arena and the World Eaters, you're only allowed to win 8 times in a row, and that's it. You're only allowed to do your 8 fights, period. No more. No more, no less. And the reason why is because it's considered vainglory. It's considered too egotistic of you to keep going after 8. So if you win 8 times in a row, you just call it done. You're like, all right, just a little bit of humility, a little humble, because I respect all of you. I proved my worth. Let me go sit on the sidelines now. I could probably go on and get 20 more people, but nah, I'd rather sit aside. Well, this World Eater, Delatris, he decides that he's going to do his 8 to regain his glory after getting shot in the face and being dishonored by Lothar of Saren. But because he did abandon his own brothers, he abandoned their Brotherhood. He left them to really get fucked. Even though he thought in his head that they were going to win the day, well, the enemy obviously had different plans about that. So the World Eaters said, no, you're not done yet. And the next challenger stepped up to the plate, and the guy goes, fuck off. I already did my 8. I don't want to, cause issues now. But the World Eaters were blocking him. They said, no, you're going to fight. And they made him fight. They made him fight over 30 rounds. And by the third round, like the 30th round, he was tired. He could not physically fight anymore. And finally, the last contestant steps up and he goes, to the death. No longer are we fighting just to get third blood, where you essentially hit me 3 times. No, now I'm fighting to kill you. Now, this is, of course, all about Brotherhood. This is what they're teaching him. And they even spare his life and they say, without Brotherhood, this Legion is nothing. Without Brotherhood, we're nothing but fucking savages to the Emperor. We are going to have to be together and united. Never should we abandon our posts, because you abandoning your posts, you may think, oh, well, that's because that human bitch told me to stay there, so fuck her. No. She is one of us. She's part of our Brotherhood. So by you abandoning your post, you're abandoning all of us. And if you're going to abandon us, you may as well fucking die. So that's what this Legion is all about, is Brotherhood. And as I said, it's a lot like Salamanders in that regard, is that any person could be a part of their Brotherhood. You could always find yourself proving your worth to them to the point that they can actually consider you a World Eater, despite the fact you're not an Astartes. Look at Lothar of Saren. She proved that she's a bad bitch who doesn't want to be fucked with. And as a shown of, honor, they put a bloody handprint on her shirt. And in this Legion, that means you are one of them. So, this Legion is all about that. The Brotherhood, the camaraderie. They're not about pack mentality like the Space Wolves are before you start drawing those lines. Because Space Wolves are all about, like, if you and I were both training together and we have the same gene seed, we're brothers. And we're going to stay as a pack together. World Eaters are not about, oh, okay, you and I are from the same training regiment, you and I are from the same trials. No. They're more about, all right, you and I fought alongside each other. You're an honorable warrior. I'm an honorable warrior. I respect you. I'm going to guard your back. And you guard mine. That's the way their Brotherhood works. Whereas the Space Wolves is more of like, we'll work with each other, but we work really well with people who we have some relations with. Either gene seed or we just grew up together because we're pack brothers. Now, while we're talking about Brotherhood and people and how people integrate in the World Eaters, let's talk about the way the serfs are treated. Well, they're treated very poorly. In the World Eaters, they don't have servants, they have slaves. They do not... Now, see, this is kind of the hard thing, is that in the Imperium, even in the Great Crusade, they had slaves. Because that's what some legions do. Some legions don't care for humans, they just enslave them, they whip them around, they kill them just for shits and giggles, and that's the way they operate. And the Emperor doesn't give a fuck, because there's way too many humans to really care about these individual ones. Some servants, like the Ultramarines, like the Blood Angels, like the Salamanders, they treat their humans with a bit of respect. They actually give them nice quarters. They actually let them have some personalization to their equipment. They even become artificers and stuff like that. World Eaters, they don't really like humans that much, so they treat them like slaves. they will have a bunch of slaves in chains and tug them along and drag them with them wherever they go and go, "Slave, give me my drink. Slave, give me my food. Slave, tend to my wounds." Now, speaking about wounds, the World Eaters don't really have a lot of apothecaries, so it's been kind of delegated to the slaves to take care of the Space Marines. And, you know, that kind of seems weird, but that's just the reality of it. Because the World Eaters, they'd rather get in the fight. They don't want to sit by and tend to the wounded. They don't believe in that. They believe more in the martial prowess of, if you get fucked over, like your leg gets blasted off, you didn't deserve your leg anyways. You're too fucking weak to have your leg. So that's the whole reason why it would be more or less up to the human, the servants, to tend to your wounds rather than an actual Space Marine tending to your wounds. Now, let's talk about Space Marine librarians, because may as well, since we're talking about their apothecaries. Now, with librarians, the World Eaters did have some, even after the Council of Nicaea edict. They still had some librarians, but those librarians were reserved. They were never allowed with the crew, and they were really just isolated from everyone else. And the reason being is that when the Butcher Nails were incorporated into the Legion, the librarians, being psychers, they tend to have this weird effect on the metal in the Butcher Nails, which is that the Butcher Nails are constantly burrowing into your brain, they're biting in the back of your skull, and they dig their nails deeper and deeper into you when you're not fighting. Now, this excruciating pain gets relieved when you're fighting, when you're splattering blood everywhere. It relieves the pain. Well, the problem with it is that if a librarian is nearby, the electricity coming off of their psychic prowess tingles the Butcher Nails and makes it bite harder. So this is why a lot of World Eaters will flat out dislike librarians, or just flat out tell them to fuck off and get the fuck away from them. And that's just normal hospital treatment of a librarian. Now, can a librarian get a Butcher Nail? They tried that. Problem is that their head explodes. And this has been kind of a conflict. Is their head exploding because you're fucking with their head? Or is their head exploding because they're being overloaded with so much anger and power that their psychic or mind can't handle this much psychic power? It's been kind of iffy on the subject. I like to think that they're being overflooded with emotions of anger to the point that their heads just explode. It's a lot like an orc shaman who's surrounded by orcs. It's too much power for him to handle, he's just gonna blow up. So that's the way I think of it. You guys may think of it differently. Mind you, the books are always open to interpretation. So, now that we're talking about that, let's talk about the Butcher Nails. How did the Legion view the Butcher Nails? Well, the Butcher Nails are always fucking fun to talk about, because I love them. See, the Mechanicus wasn't able to fully replicate the arcane technology of the Butcher Nails, but what they do, in essence, is when you insert them into a normal human being, it pushes them past the limits. It makes them stronger. It makes them tougher. It makes it where their body doesn't give into fatigue that easily. Now incorporate that into an Astartes, well, this is why it's been seen where one World Eater was able to punch through a Custodes' chest. This is due to the Butcher Nails. Now, when the Legion first incorporated the Butcher Nails, it had a 100% mortality death rate, because they didn't fully understand how to fully replicate it, so many Astartes died. This pissed off Angron to a considerable degree. He kind of was disgruntled with his Legion, saying that they're fucking weaklings that aren't really deserving to be his sons. So, if a World Eater failed to meet his deadline, like you weren't able to conquer a world in a set amount of time, or you weren't able to implement this much Butcher Nails into your Legion, or you just had so many recruits die from the Butcher Nails, then he would start ordering a decimation. And decimation is 1/10 of every World Eater gets killed by the other 9/10. Now, a Centurion finally said, fuck this, I am not complying with this after the Gehenna massacre. This pissed off Angron extremely. And Angron personally massacred many of his own World Eaters. But he was subdued by his librarians, and he calmed down a little bit after his little pissy fit. Now, this is where that same Centurion found out that the apothecary Gala and Surlock finally perfected a way to mass produce the Butcher Nails. This sent the Centurion into a failed revolt where he actually tried to beat Angron's ass, but he lost and he got his ass killed. And this is where Karn became the first to get the butcher nails. And this is where we get this interesting dialogue between Karn and Lotara Saren. Lotara Saren asks, well, why'd you get the butcher nails done? Why'd you get the surgery done? To which he replies, to get closer with my Primarch, to understand him better, somewhere along that line. And Lotara Saren goes, well, do you? And Karn replies, nope. I don't understand him any more than what I did before. But he didn't say it as wordy, he just said no. Because they're badass. Now, the thing with the butcher nails is that it has side effects. So it overloads you with aggression, pain, but it also deadens your other senses. It deadens your focus. I mean, not your focus, but it deadens your senses. It deadens your hearing. It'll deaden your taste. It'll deaden a lot of things. Karn illustrates it very well, and one of his Chosen of Corn is he talks about how everything he eats tastes like just sand. It just tastes like graveled up sand. And I think that's awesome. And when, of course, this was incorporated in the other Legion, in the other Astartes, they all started to become more and more savage. This was met with mixed reviews. See, on one side, the Legion viewed it as a blessing, as the butcher nails made them stronger than any other Astartes could be. But on the other hand, the rest of the Legion viewed it as a bad thing, as now the butcher nails are bleeding out their nobility. They're no longer noble warriors anymore. They're starting to become more and more just raiders and slavers and mass pillagers. They're more just pirates than they are actual warriors. And this was what some of them are starting to get worried about, was what is these butcher nails doing to us? Now, just like what the Warhounds were, these guys are starting to become a symbol where they would rarely be used on any real battlefront in the Great Crusade. This was mostly due to the fact that Angron was personally, I would say, berated by the Emperor, because the Emperor didn't approve of the butcher nails being inducted into his Astartes. He didn't like this. Now, this could possibly be because Big E knows that Khorne would love this, or it could just be that he doesn't like seeing this because he knows that this is starting to cost the Imperium rather than benefit. After all, if Horus decided to charge at an enemy and be a shock trooper like the World Eaters are, Horus does the minimal amount of collateral damage. He ends up destroying one world, but in return, all the worlds in the solar system will surrender to him. That's a good game. Whereas Angron will destroy every fucking person, every world in his wake, and that will end up costing him a lot of resources because now you gotta rebuild everything. So, as a way to kind of censor Angron and let him learn his lesson, was to send him up in the northern fringes of the Great Crusade, away from the human settlements and civilizations. So if there's any human settlements and civilizations, the World Eaters would not be anywhere around there to really fuck things up. Instead, they were more in the northern regions, dealing with alien Xenos, because at least then the Emperor doesn't give a fuck if he butchers every infant, child, and man, woman. He doesn't care, because, you know, they're fucking Xenos. So this is where Angron was kind of left to his own demise. But the issue is, though, that Angron being given this kind of freedom, he kept implementing the same traditions that the Emperor was bitching at him about. This, of course, didn't settle well with him, and he kind of basically sent him back into the front lines to deal with humans again, but this time he was always going to kind of have another legion with him, like Horus or Ultramarines, anyone really. But even then, other Astartes were starting to get very disgusted with the World Eaters and their practices. On one hand, Sigismund liked the arenas because he proved himself. He's a good warrior. He's a good duelist. He proved himself to the World Eaters, and the World Eaters respected him. But on the other hand, they didn't like on how the World Eaters would just carelessly charge at the enemy and end up costing more troops than what it should have been. Because that's just not worth it to the Imperium to have to constantly keep building new power armor just because these dumbasses keep charging at the front lines into giant cannon batteries. But no one can say that they weren't effective. They did get the job done. If you ever put too much resistance against the Imperium, or you were just too alien or too weird that the Imperium just couldn't risk ever complying with you, the World Eaters were definitely your guys to send. They could annihilate the whole fucking world and not a single person would be alive to tell about it. So that's the one nice thing about the World Eaters. Now, aside from that, if you ever decide to buy your own World Eaters and you want to play 30K version of World Eaters, just know their color for their paint and armor is white for their chest, arms, and legs, and their helmet, but it would be blue for the shoulder pads, and some of them, their backpacks are blue, but sometimes it's white, so it's kind of iffy on that. I would say decide on your own whether or not you want to put it as a blue or white. I would personally go with brass. Now, the reason why you don't do blue chests and blue legs with white shoulders is because those are Warhound paint, and these aren't Warhounds you want. These are World Eaters. This is more my jam, baby. So besides that, this has been World Eaters lore, Preheresy. I hope you guys learned a lot. I mean, you guys learned about how the Legion viewed the butcher nails at the beginning. You guys learned about how they had some traditions regarding arenas, and they also had their own way of dealing with humans. They viewed them as slaves rather than as really helpful servants or serfs like other legions. But on the flip side, those servants and serfs, if they worked really hard, they could always earn themselves into the arms of the Brotherhood. Besides that, this has been Freezer 700. See you guys next time.